Good morning, everyone. Welcome to SDAC. I'm Bobby Dutta, and I co-chair SDAC. Please know that this event is being recorded for later broadcast on YouTube. Before I proceed with the presentation, we have a couple of housekeeping rules for the virtual event. To avoid an echo, please be sure to mute speakers and microphones on one device if using multiple devices. If you do not hear the echo, then you are most likely the one that's causing the echo. So please check your devices. If not speaking or asking a question, please mute your microphone. Please ask questions using the chat functions. Items will be addressed in the order that they're received. Thank you. Now, to kick off our event, we have a very distinguished keynote speaker at SDAC, Mr. Joe Xavier. Joe Xavier, Director, Department of Rehab, has over 36 years of experience in business and public administration, as well as many years participating in advocacy and community organization. As an immigrant, a blind consumer, a beneficiary of the door services, Joe has the experience and understands the challenges and opportunities available to individuals with disabilities and the services required to maximize an individual's full potential. Joe believes in the talent and potential of individuals with disabilities in investing in the future through creativity, ingenuity, and innovation, ensuring decisions and actions are informed by interested individuals and groups in pursuing excellence through continuous improvement and preserving public trust, and through compassionate and responsible provision of services. So without further ado, let's welcome Director Joe Xavier. Director Xavier, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Bobby. First of all, let me make sure that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for that warm introduction. Really honored to come back and spend some time with the SDAC and share some information with you. Just start by applauding the work that the committee is doing to continue to advance employment opportunities and promotional opportunities for individuals with disabilities within civil service. And all of the others who have joined that are not on the SDAC, glad to have you part of this conversation. Glad to have your partnership and your contribution to the same of improving opportunities for people with disabilities. Just wanted to shout out to Martin Luther King Day that we just had on Monday. And for those of you who don't know, Ed Roberts Day is on the 23rd. Ed Roberts was a pivotal figure in the opportunities of employment and community living for individuals with disabilities. So we're commemorating his time and contributions on Sunday. Landai, I think, is able to be with us today. I hope that she's on. She's our Chief of HR, and she's joining me. Today, we have a number of things that we'll be talking about that she has been integral with here at the department. So I want to share with you the landscape around employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities and talk about a number of initiatives that have come on in the last couple of years. And as with most presentations, the favorite part for me is the opportunity to get into questions and answers. And so we'll look forward to doing so. So let me talk about some of the initiatives that have been underway that are advancing employment for people with disabilities within civil service. But first, I think it's really important for us to have the context, right? And I think the realization that we all work with is that the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities persists around 70%, right? And it would be unconscionable if the general public had that level of an unemployment rate. And frankly, the rate has remained largely unchanged since the passage of the ADA, which means doubling down on the emphasis and the focus that we have to move that needle. We know that society, through the enactment of public policy, is moving away and has ended here in California segregated employment and employment that is paying less than a minimum wage. In California, California itself is the largest employer, right? The state of California is the largest employer. So obviously lots of opportunity here for individuals with disability. And we know that employment is continually and increasingly being recognized as a pillar of good health. It's the determinants of health for individuals with disability. So let me start by talking about California leads as an employer and what that is and what came of it, because it's really important to the work that before us. So it began back in the summer of 2019, and I'm going to really summarize this in the interest of time. The governor brought together the top leadership of the administration to really address a number of issues, but really with the aim of making California an employer of choice, right? And they really wanted to ensure that we had representation and that we had an inclusive workforce reflecting the California that we serve, right? So one of the things that we clearly understood from that initiative is that it wasn't simply about census and about adding more numbers. It really was looking at the overall structure and how do we address some of the inequities that existed and how do we make a difference on that front. So the governor created 4 task forces to really make California lead as an employer. The diversity task force was one of the 4, and I'll speak specifically to that because it has a provision in it that dealt with employment for individuals with disabilities. And so the work group recommendations, okay, that came out of the subgroup on disability and out of the diversity task force really built on a number of prior efforts. More recently, it was the effort around the joint report that for some of you may recall took place back in 2015. And then more recently, it also encompassed some of what was in AB 365. And I'll talk about the successor to that here in a second, right? So in addition to the recommendations that came out of that, and I'll touch base on some of those here in a second, the governor added in the current budget money and positions to implement the recommendations to address diversity, equity, inclusion, which includes employment for individuals with disabilities within the civil service structure. So AB 313 was just signed into law a few months ago. And AB 313 was the successor to 365. And if you have not already looked at that piece of legislation, would encourage you to do so because there's a number of details in AB 313 that are very specific to the employment opportunities of individuals with disabilities. I'm going to walk through a couple of them at a high level, but obviously, in the interest of time, I won't read every detail. One is that it includes a range of recommendations in AB 13 that are very much in line with the recommendations that came out of prior efforts, most recently, the diversity task force that I mentioned. It takes a series of actions to improve civil service hiring opportunities for individuals with disabilities. Agencies now need to develop their own reasonable accommodations policies to ensure that individuals are getting accommodations appropriately and timely. And it requires that CalHR is looking at the affirmative action plans that departments prepare to hiring individuals with disabilities, and that where they are not adequate for the subject at hand, then they have to work with those departments to bring those corrective, those action plans up to speed, for lack of a better term, right? Now, The bill also requires that CalHR report to the legislature on a number of things, including how many hires were made, what recommendations have been implemented, what's going on with the action plans that I just described. So there's all, and how they are implementing the task force recommendations, right? It also requires that CalHR develop future recommendations, future actions to improve the hiring of people with disabilities across all of agencies, right? It further encourages the expansion of leave. Okay, now that's a lot of information. I'll come back to questions here in a second. I want to shift to another initiative that the governor put forth, which I think is really important. And it is an initiative the governor used exempt positions to put individuals with intellectual development disabilities into every agency. One of the things that I think is really important for us to keep in mind about this initiative and about the task force that I described is really the administration's commitment to continue to improve the employment opportunity for individuals with disabilities. So as I mentioned, all the agencies have a position, either in the agency or in a department within the agency, that is used as an entry point for individuals' intellectual developmental disabilities. And those individuals go to work respectively. And when they promote out of that position into another position, then another individual has an opportunity to access them, right? One of the other things that I wanted to share with you is an initiative that has taken place here at the Department of Rehabilitation. We know that one of the most important contributors to individuals going to work is having work experience. And so we've stood up an initiative here at the Department of Rehabilitation that really says we provide a pathway to meaningful employment opportunities, right? And so what it does is it's called fill, upskill, and backfill. So we use a number of experiences that we've had in the past, both at our Orientation Center for the Blind and here at our accounting section, where we brought individuals in various capacities. We gave them an opportunity to develop their skill, and they went off and got full-time employment. So we've now expanded that across the entirety of the organization, right? So that's one example of an initiative that we have been putting into place. We also have been working with the Department of Developmental Services, okay, to also get individuals into civil service. It's called the State Internship Program, and that gives individuals the opportunity to get in, get some skill, be eligible for LEAP certifications, et cetera, right? So as we've done this initiative here at the department, we started by establishing 35 pathways to get into the position. We're in the process of doubling that to 70. And when we do, we'll double that to 140. And this is really about real work in the real world for real pay. So what the success of this is that individuals that come into these various pathways, they move on into competitive integrated employment, whether it's in civil service, state, federal, or local, whether it's in nonprofits, for-profits, we don't care, as long as it is, you know, competitive integrated employment, right? And the teams that are working with the individuals, so all of you that are hiring managers, as an example, if you had such a pathway in your department, your jobs, our jobs here, are to help the individual develop that skill that would make them employable and getting a job. And once individuals move on, we backfill that again, providing another pathway for another individual. So how do we bring people into it? Well, we use a range of entry points for individuals to come into our pathway. It could be volunteer, student assistance, it could be limited term positions, lead positions. We just use a range of whatever is available. We obviously prefer the individual to get paid whenever that is possible, but we also use volunteer as an opportunity to do that. And the funding and the positions, we do not add any positions to the department, and any funding that we use is from our existing dollars to provide these pathways. So what would I ask of you? Well, in every one of your departments, if we had such a pathway at play, that provided more opportunities for individuals to get that work experience and go on into competitive integrated employment. So let me talk a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion, because I think it's really applicable to employment of people with disabilities. First of all, we know that the systemic racism across our systems continues to be a focus and continues to be addressed. And while we've made some progress, we know we have a long way to go on that front. So a number of things are being looked at, including establishing equity officers at the agency level and equity officers within the departments. And the plans are being developed to address, bring forth the strategies to address the systemic racism. And that needs to include the intersectionality with disability, right? And when we talk about the intersectionality with disability, we need to always keep in mind that disability is the visible disability, like myself or somebody who's blind, and the hidden disability, someone that has an anxiety disorder, somebody that suffers from depression, somebody that has a behavioral health and mental health illness, right? So when we think of disability, it's not just the visible, clearly the invisible. I'll touch base quickly on the hybrid workforce. Obviously, there's considerable benefit to individuals with disabilities. One thing is you don't have to deal with the transportation to get to and from work, as an example, right? And we know that the hybrid workforce has evolved over the last couple of years. We know that it will continue to evolve in the coming couple of years. Departments continue to adapt to supporting the hybrid workforce. I know that we here at this department have had a considerable amount of effort on that front. But we also have a responsibility as individuals with disabilities to continue to evolve. And that can come in forms of how do we engage in all the virtual work, as well as how do we continue to develop our own professional self, and how do we continue to ensure that we are taking up strategies that make sure that we continue to be socially engaged and visible with the rest of the workforce. So I'm going to talk real quickly about what the department does and then wrap it up so we can get into questions. So what do we do here at the Department of Rehabilitation that supports all of the things that I've said? Well, one, we can provide a candidate work pool for sections and units and divisions and departments that are hiring. We are in the short time frame going to be sending out a playbook that helps the department with some 12 different strategies on what they can do to increase employment opportunities for people with disabilities in their workforce. We provide training on training on disability, training on reasonable accommodations, a range of other technical assistance that we make available. And obviously, one of the things that is mandated in AB 313, and even outside of AB 313, we'll continue to work with our colleagues at CalHR and GovOps to provide them with the technical assistance and bring our expertise to that conversation to continue to advance all of what I mentioned and the things that are yet to come. We have a partnership with the Department of Developmental Services for implementing the state employment initiative that talked about, the exempt initiative that the governor has. And our community partnership obviously includes all of our DACs, you as the State Disability Advisory Council, and then organizations like the Association of California State Employees with Disabilities. So what's my ask of you as I wrap this up and open up for questions? One, continue your work being a voice, being the champion for the employment opportunity and the promotional opportunity of individuals with disabilities. Representation matters. I'm very proud of the fact that here at the DIS department, half of our executives are individuals who self-identify as having a disability. 40% of our leadership has a disability. 30% of our workforce self-identifies as having a disability. But all that means that each of us have the opportunity to be ready for those next promotional opportunities. So just ask you to continue to do that. because we need that representation across all of the departments. So I will open this up. I welcome any questions from you or any suggestions as you've heard the things that I've shared with you. What are the recommendations or suggestions that you would say, hey, Joe, as you're doing this work, you really should be thinking about doing this or including that. So I will stop there because I really want to have an opportunity for questions and answers. And Bobby, I'll turn it back over to you and open it up.
Thank you, Director Xavier. That was very informative presentation. I was disheartened to learn that there's 70% unemployment rate among persons with disabilities. And that has not changed since passage of ADA. We must do better than that, and we are better than that. So I was also impressed with the efforts that DOOR is making, and you were part of that diversity task force for the governor, and you contributed richly into that program. My question now is, I know that DOOR, you explain what you're doing in terms with the internship and so on to get people the real work experience so they can get real pay. Has that model been rolled out to all the other departments through this diversity equity officer that you mentioned? And if not, what can we do to make that happen?
Yeah, so good question, Bobby. So two things. One, the diversity equity work has been underway, but it, frankly, as a concentrated focus is in its early infancy stages. And so, yes, we will be asking our equity teams to take that up across the departments. And yes, in terms of the Pathways Initiative, that is one of the strategies that as we are engaging with departments, that we are asking departments to take up to provide those pathways. And the other thing that we are doing to make sure that departments are aware of that is a forum like this, where we're making the initiative known. So to you and the work that you're doing with the DACs and your respective departments, welcome the opportunity to come engage with you on the details with that. Welcome the opportunity to make this known to your leadership and your department. So we're taking a mini pathways approach to make sure that we have other departments participating in it.
Thank you so much. We have a question in chat. It says, Director Xavier, can you please provide a time frame for that 12 steps that DOOR will provide? Will this be available for the state agencies?
So the short answer is yes. And we, obviously, well, so let me answer the question first and then tell you why. I'm hoping that by February, we can make that formal across all of the departments, right? Make it known to all of the departments. Obviously, one of the delays here, this is something we've been working on for a number of months, but, competing interests, like the budget as an example. So we're working on that right now. So my hope is that by February, we can formally have a tool that we can share with all of you and with all of your departments to be able to say, here are a range of strategies that you can be using.
Thank you. Rami, you have your hand up, so please unmute and ask the director a question.
Hi, Director Xavier, nice to see you again. I have a question about the internship program at Department of Rehabilitation. You mentioned that the 35 positions, it'll start to increase over time.
Yes.
Just kind of speaking from real life situation, a friend of mine, a close friend of mine who has the same autoimmune disability that I have, however, she's a lot more progressed, where she's actually bedridden. And is this an appropriate avenue for someone who is intellectually and physically able to telework or do remote work? Would this be a good avenue for them to try and come back into the workforce?
Well, so I want to address two different issues that I think are here in your question. By the way, is Lendai, are you on? Landai Dong? No? Okay. I was just going to have her speak to this a little bit. Landai is our chief of HR, and I was hoping that she was going to be able to join me, so she must have got caught up. So let me answer your question. There's sort of two parts to your question that I want to speak to. One is, in terms of the pathways and how we approach that, yes, where telework is a viable element of that, we here always have and will continue to support telework being part of that experience, right? So the interns that we're talking about that I described here at the department, yes, a number of them are teleworking, and the volume of telework will range from a lot to a little. Just it's going to depend on the person and the circumstance and the individual. So with that, the other part of your question is, you have an individual who you're saying would like to get back into the workforce, but is only able to do that seemingly having access to telework is the way for that to be the case.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge believer in saying, why not try?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I always tell people, don't say no to yourself. Let somebody else say no.
Yeah.
And if she doesn't engage to explore the possibility, we'll never figure out how we can make it work. Right? So my short answer to that would be, ask her to give it a shot. Why not?
And how would somebody from the outside go about taking advantage of that opportunity? Is it just going to the website and searching for the program and taking it from there?
Well, so there's two different things. So here at the Department of Rehabilitation, if somebody was interested in participating in our pathways and they're an individual with a disability, I would have them either get a hold of our HR shop, and they can specifically ask for Landai Dong, D-O-N-G, she's our HR chief, and just say, hey, I've heard about your pathways, I'm interested in being considered.
Okay.
Okay? That gets you right to the front door of who's best positioned to answer that.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So we have some more people in comments who are asking questions.
Sure.
So I have a question here from Jay Galvin. How can an agency establish their own DEI? Any suggestions?
So how can they do it? Well, I mean, I think it starts with conversations with leadership. And if you're on the DAC at your department, I would just engage through the DAC and whatever that processes or protocols are in your department, and raise the question and pose that very question. Do we have a DEI initiative? And if not, how do we get one started? And my ask will be that when there's engagement in DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion work, that it include the intersectionality of disability. And frankly, intersectionality is not specific to disability, but we really need to be intentional about ensuring that disability is part of all DEI conversations.
Thank you so much. We have another comment question from Alex about hybrid with regards to people with disabilities and the 70% unemployment. Is there information about how many of those cannot work in an office but could absolutely do the work if they work from home? And as the work from office could be a deterrent or a greater obstacle?
Yeah, I don't know of any particular statistics or data that says, here's how many people could work if they only had to do it, if they could only do it remotely. But clearly, given where we are going as a society, frankly, not just the state, I mean, if you think about all of the workforce, as it is really moving more and more into this hybrid approach, that opportunity, I think, exists more today than it ever has before, right? We do have individuals in this department that might be teleworking 100% of the time. So if there's an individual such as you described, this might be ideal. But at the moment, I would say no data on that front. For individuals that are interested, really just encourage engaging and exploring that opportunity when positions are made available.
That's a wonderful answer. Yeah, I agree. It's a great area for possible research. Lucinda Winward from Fiscal in chat asks, those on the autism spectrum are and will be entering the workforce more regularly thanks to early intervention efforts of the last 10 to 15 years. They have tremendous ability to contribute intellectually and creatively. This population needs focused attention in the workplace. There must be education of the general workforce of their strengths and needed accommodations. They are unique unto themselves and as members of the greater population. How would you foresee the changes playing out with respect to education of the general workforce to accommodate intellectual and social emotional differences? Thank you.
Great question. And great question, because I really like the fact that it calls into question sort of two things. One is the quote hidden disability, and the other one is, and how do we help the workforce get beyond it looks different, I don't understand it, to, oh yeah, just part of every day. And so I mentioned a couple of things earlier that I'll expand on. The governor's exempt appointment initiative that's underway. A number of individuals that we placed are on the spectrum. And what departments are saying, oh my goodness, these folks, this individual has just amazing skills we didn't know. So in that department, they now are going to be much more of a champion, and I believe will provide more opportunities for other individuals where that would not have been in the past. So experience, right? It removes that fear, removes that unknown. Two, we provide training and technical assistance to the workforce to continue to remove the myths, the stereotypes, the fears around individuals with disabilities in the workplace. And so the more that we do that, then the more that it just becomes part of who we are, part of the workforce, right? And I'm an opportunist by nature, so I have to do this. We are doing a lot of work with our colleagues in the preschool and K-12 systems to really start ensuring that individuals with the most significant disabilities are really integrated in the education system. And there's two primary drivers in my mind for that piece. One is development of the skill that everybody needs to go to work. How do you develop that skill to go to work if people don't believe that you can go to work? And if you're not given the opportunity to participate in integrated settings where you get to develop those skills. So that's one piece of that. Now, is that going to pay dividends today? No, but it will tomorrow for those individuals. But here's the other part that I think is equally important. I have a 5-year-old grandson. I'm blind. My 5-year-old grandson does not see blindness as a barrier to anything. If he wants me to change the batteries on Thomas the train, he takes my finger and he puts it right on the screw head and it says, right here, Papa. What does that mean? Well, that means when Milo is 10, 15, 20, and 25, and he sees somebody who's blind or somebody with a disability, he's not going to go, oh my God, look at that. He's going to go, hey, can you help me change the batteries on my whatever? Do you want to play horsey? Whatever he's going to do at that age. So that to me is so important because it gets at this issue that if we grow up with people with significant disabilities, then when they get to the workplace, they're not weird or different or odd. They're just like everybody else, right? Some of us are 6'9" and some of us are 4'9". Some of us can sing, and some of us, like me, cannot carry a tune in a bucket, right? But that's who we are. So, as you can tell, I have no passion around this, okay? But thank you for that question. And by the way, How do we socialize our workplaces to this? You know, again, it's not just what we do here at the department. How do each of you continue to give voice and face so that it becomes normal?
I love what you're saying. I totally agree with your message. It's wonderful to hear you speaking that. Okay, I actually have a question for myself with a comment. So a quick anecdote. So when I came out of high school with my chronic illness, we weren't sure I would ever work, that I would ever be able to hold down a full-time job because of chronic health issues, invisible illness. And I ended up getting DOR services to help me get some education. What's interesting about this is now as an adult, I'm surprised to hear you talking about that state of California workers might be able to get resources or help from DOR. I guess I had ignorance around that area. And I'm excited to hear you talking about that there's a playbook that you're going to be sending out. So I definitely wanted to request from you if you could make sure that the playbook information comes to Bobby so that we can distribute that. That's the first thing.
Yep.
The second thing is that you're talking about pathways, and I want to ask a little more about the pathways because that has been kind of a big confusion point for me. How do people get services from Department of Rehab? And I think I kind of had the impression that it was you had to go through certain hoops to get those resources, get DOR help.
So let me nuance a couple of issues you're bringing up. And the first answer, yes, on the playbook. As soon as I have a publishable copy, yes, absolutely, we'll send a copy to Bobby so you guys have the full benefit of that. And again, always welcome coming back and engaging or coming to your departments and engaging in that front as well. And I want to then go back and nuance two things that you said. So number one is in terms of getting services from the Department of Rehabilitation, absolutely connect wherever the individual is, what's the closest office to them, and engage there. And the first thing to me that I would say, when I tell somebody, I want you to call the office in Elk Grove and tell them that you were here and you want to go to work. Not I want services. You want to go to work. Okay? The services follow that. We provide whatever services are necessary to mitigate / eliminate the barriers that an individual has to employment. In your case, you talked about getting an education. If your career goal requires that education, that's what we do. In my case, it might be learning how to use assistive technology so that I can, read, write, do those basic self-communication functions and carry out my professional duties. What this Pathways does is create a work experience in the real workplace, because the biggest barrier for individuals with disabilities to go to work is lack of work experience. Okay?
Absolutely.
You need a job to get experience. You need experience to get a job. Chicken and egg. It's like, what the hell? Okay? And so what we said here is enough of this. We ourselves, we have 85 offices up and down the state. We ourselves are going to provide those pathways. Okay? And where we can make them paid, we're going to. Where it's not paid, it's volunteer. But you still have the benefit of the experience. You have the benefit of a resume. You can put on the resume the work that you were doing. You have somebody to serve as a reference, right? Now, you also brought up, do we provide services to individuals who are already employed? Yes, we do have advancing in employment as a service, right? So for those where you think it might be beneficial to you, it's the same thing, okay? We don't know what that service is because what is it you're trying to accomplish, right? That's the most important thing to understand about the work we do. It's individualized to the person. And the disability is experienced by every person in a different way. No two people experience blindness in the same way.
Absolutely. Totally
Okay.
true. So to follow up with that question, I'm very excited to hear you saying that your team, that DOR is reaching out and wanting to give presentations. I think it would be great if you could have someone provide to Bobby the information so that our DACs can reach out to DOR and set up those. If did I hear that correctly? That you guys are looking to get out there and talk to, like, give presentations about the work that you guys are doing right now?
Well, we're certainly more than willing to do that. You know, every department has a DAC. So you sat here, you heard this presentation. If you work at the ABC department, you say, you know what, I like the rest of my, I like my other DAC to hear this. Just reach out to us, okay?
Awesome.
I don't know who will come and do that presentation, but we'll be glad to come and share with you what's going on with these initiatives and what are the things that we're doing at the department, okay?
Because I love the idea of us helping each other and getting the message out as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mission of this department is to help individuals with disabilities get a job, keep a job, and get a better job.
We have another question. Alicia asked, another large barrier is access to transportation. What transportation services are available to inmates with disabilities going home to re-enter their communities?
So I don't know that I can answer that question with any kind of expertise on this front. I think that's a question that might be better suited for the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Now, to the extent that that was an individual that was connected to the Department of Rehabilitation and was getting services from the department, then there might be some ability for us to do some of that. But I think the way you described this individual, they might still be in the correction system. So I don't know that I can answer that specifically.
We appreciate your directness. I know sometimes. Bobby, did you have anything more that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I just saw another question posed. It's an important one from David. He writes in chat, in my DAC, we have attempted to comment on reasonable accommodation and telework policy development. And we have been told multiple times by our executive directors that she could not comment on these matters because they possibly encroach on collective bargaining laws and under the DILS Act. And the question is twofold. One, how do you overcome this kind of resistance? And secondly, has any of the other DACs might have encountered this? Well, the second part I'm not going to ask you because you're not part of DAC. But
I was just going to say that, Bobby. I'll forgo the second part. You know, so you know, you have a very unique, a very specific situation there. I don't know that it would be appropriate for me to say, here's the solution to something that I lack enough awareness and understanding of to do that. More generally, what I would say to you is, you know, education is a wonderful thing. And information is a wonderful thing. And so, you know, if I'm sitting where you're sitting with the limited information from the question you posed, I'd be engaging my other DACs and saying, are you guys advancing recommendations on this front? And if so, how are you doing it? And then be able to share that.
Thank you very much for that response. And if the author of this question has any more comments, you're welcome to unmute and ask Director Xavier any follow-up. But while you're doing that, I have a couple of questions, one of which I already brought up previously. You know, you mentioned a good point that call up your office and instead of saying what services you offer, simply say, I want to work, and the service is going to follow. In relationship to that question, one of the things that DOR does is very important is LEAP certification. You provide that by doing certain process, and once you're LEAP certified, then you get to put on a list with the CalHR, and you're reachable in terms of getting interviews and access and all that. My question, as I asked previously, is there a mechanism in place, given what happened with COVID and so forth, to do this certification remotely, like in a breakout room or some other form, that so you can reach a lot more, population out there who might be in need of this services rather than going to your office?
So, and that's earlier I was asking if Lendi was on, because Lendi was going to follow up on this for me. And so I don't have that answer specifically, Bobby, but I will give you the answer absolute, so you can share with everybody. But I want to address another piece of what you're bringing up, which is how do you get LEAP certified? And how you get LEAP certified is you call our VR offices and you simply say, hey, I'm a person with a disability, and I would like to be certified, LEAP certified. And I'm almost 99% sure that this is all feasible through virtual, obviously taking into account the unique circumstances of every individual, okay? So my advice to all of you and whoever you share the message is simply, make connection with the local office where you / the individual is, and simply make that ask. I want to be LEAP certified. Can we do this virtually? Okay. And I will get you a definitive answer if we are doing it. I'm 99% sure, but I don't want to tell you something that I come back and later and say, no, it wasn't the case. Because if it's not the case, I want to know why not. And there might be a good reason. I just don't know what it is.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the response. And in addition to that, you commented on learning, technology, assistive devices, and so on. Technology has progressed quite a bit, and there's a lot available from standpoint of assistive technology that is human-centered. It's centered towards the need of that individual, what they need. Is there a program that DOOR has, or anybody else, to your knowledge, that provide that kind of training to somebody who can benefit from that technology that wasn't available earlier, but it's available now?
Well, so if you are a consumer of the Department of Rehabilitation, absolutely. Those are services that we provide to anybody that needs, one, the technology, and then two, how to use it. If you are not a consumer of the Department of Rehabilitation and you are trying to understand both what's out there in technology, and two, how can you learn how to use maybe some technology you're not using? We don't necessarily provide that service directly. I mean, we have a number of programs that provide you with device lending, but I think what you're asking about goes a little bit beyond that. I would just encourage engaging with organizations like ACSED, who may have forums from time to time on what are technologies, what's available, and how do you get them, and how do you learn how to use them. And I think the other thing that I would say is that the technology is going to vary greatly depending on the individual's needs, and frankly, to some degree, on the disability they have. So there's somebody who's blind versus somebody who's deaf. You're going to have very different technology. So it's unlikely you'll have sort of the one-stop shopping. Okay. One other thing that I would say to you is on our webpage, there's what's called an assistive technology supplier directory. And if you take a look at that, you're going to see a range of assistive technology providers, and that could be useful information to you as well.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat. So can you provide insights into what is the intent of the legislation that requires state agencies to advise the head of the agencies to have an effective SDAC? What does it mean to advise?
Well, I mean, I just use the plain meaning of the word. It's give them your best advice. It's give them your best recommendation. And I've often talked to boards and committees. We have many here at this department that advise us. And I tell them, repeatedly, when you provide us with a recommendation and you're not telling us how to do it, you make our work very hard and very meaningful. When you provide us with a recommendation and you say, but do A, B, C, D, most of the time those recommendations have a hard time being successful because you're framing A, B, C, D from your experience, and it may or may not be reflective of what the department can and should do, right? But, for example, a recommendation that says, to the earlier question, we recommend establishment of a diversity, equity, inclusion officer, right? You're not saying do it by going through steps 1 through 22. Okay, you're saying establish it, and then you're providing the why. Why do you need to establish a DEI officer? Why? Because it improves ABC. So to me, my advice to folks when you're making recommendations is, what are you recommending? Why are you recommending it? And not necessarily, and this is how you do it.
Great. Great response. Thank you very much for that insight. And let's see, do we have any more questions? Looks like there's one more. This is, I don't know whether it's a comment or a question. I'm going to read it to you and you can decipher. I feel as a DAC, we are limited in how we can assist person with disabilities as we are not allowed to know who these persons are due to confidentiality. Do you have any recommendations for how we can effectively advise the department on these efforts? Communication with a person with disabilities within our department.
Well, I'll nuance, separate out two things that are in that question. Number one is, to the extent that your DAC is known, if I'm an individual with a disability in your department, then I have the choice to come and make my need known to you. So, which is different from you going and engaging me and asking me if I have a need. And I think, the DAC's role there is, a bit nuanced on that front, because you have HR, you have OCR, Office of Civil Rights, that are the ones directly engaging with the individual. If the individual chooses to come to the DAC, so be it. But the other thing is that the role of the DAC is to advise on policy and practice, right? So the role of the DAC is not to engage the individual in the individual solution, right? And I think it's important to distinguish the two.
Good point. And I would add to that, recently we did a similar challenge that we encountered in our DAC, and I'm with CDPH DAC. And what we did was we actually generated a survey and we asked everybody, and we got 502 responses in response to that survey, asking them, what do you think is important for us to, tell the director or advise the director, and that's a good way of getting feedback from people that we are helping.
Exactly. Well said.
So that's all I have. Any other questions for Director Xavier? Well, not hearing anymore. I thank you, Director Xavier, for your time, and this has been really informative. We really appreciate the fact that you have taken time to answer our questions, and this is what we do at SDAC. We provide resources in way of empowerment, and you have given us plenty of knowledge and shared a lot of important information that we can carry on. So thank you again. We will follow up with your HR manager on this other question and anything else that you can provide by way of that playbook that you talked about. We'll be happy to receive them. And once again, you're welcome to stay on, and thank you. It's been really great.
Well, thank you. I always appreciate the opportunity to come and be part of the conversation. I apologize. I have another forum that I need to be at in a couple of minutes, so I will not be able to stay. I know you have other presenters. I know you have Susan, my colleague from Aging on. Sorry, right. Susan, I can't stay. I got to be at a public forum. But thank you for having me, and I look forward to the continued conversation. And again, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you, everybody.
And please come back and see us soon.
I'm always available at your invitation.
All right, great. Have a great day.